Okay, so the first thing we're going to do in Tinkercad is just play around with it and get used to this workspace and how it works. It does work on tablets. I'm hoping most of you have got access to a computer of some sort because it is easier, especially if you've got a mouse. If you can use a mouse, you'll find this a little bit easier. You can use a normal trackpad on a laptop though. That's what I'm using today. So the camera is really important in a 3D world. Now, I know that we have already used Fusion 360 to make our lamp connectors. That's a much more advanced piece of software. But you guys kind of skipped this earlier stage, and you'll find this much easier and much more accessible. I still, even though I know more advanced programs, I still use Tinkercad because I find it just a lot quicker to do simpler things. And from this I can 3D print. And I know quite a lot of you are keen to learn how to use this stuff because you know it will benefit not only your DT work, but science and maybe other projects that you want to do in other subjects. Okay, there are a number of students that use this software regularly to design things. They bring it in, and as long as it's good and they're pushing themselves, I'll then 3D print it for them. Okay, so a lot of things you see around the DT room that have been 3D printed, they've been designed by students on Tinkercad. And although it might seem basic to begin with, if you're clever with it, you can actually create quite complex things in quite an easy way. Okay, so this is very much a basic computer-aided design piece of software. So first thing we need to do is be able to navigate around the world because it's a 3D world. So we need to be able to use our camera properly. Now you'll see this cube here, and you can just click on this, click and drag it, click on the sides, click on these arrows, okay, hold it down, move it around. You can use that, but to be honest, I never use that. I actually use my mouse, so I'm right-clicking the mouse or the trackpad at the moment. This is what we call an orbit. Orbit's around a point. We've also got pan, so I'm doing exactly the same as before. So right-click, and I'm holding down Shift at the same time and moving this around. Okay, that's a pan. Okay, that's the one everyone always forgets and struggles with. And we can zoom in and out by using the mouse wheel or using the trackpad with 2 fingers, by pinching in and out. You can also use these over here. There are a few different options. I wouldn't worry about that one. Mainly a zoom function. Again, if you're struggling to use the mouse to orbit around, then just use the cube. So that's navigating around. On the right hand side, we've got our basic shapes. There are lots of other things in here. To be honest, I pretty much never use anything in there. Okay, I tend to use basic shapes most of the time. So what do? We bring in a basic shape by just clicking on it. Click on the basic shape and it just appears in here. Okay. Now if you click on the shapes, you get these boxes here. And some of them have got more options than others. Okay, so if we click on sphere, you can see it's only got steps, whereas the box has actually got a lot more options to it. Okay, so again, that is something I don't use a huge amount. Colors might be something you use. Changing it to a whole is something you'll use. So what we're going to do now is learn how to manipulate shapes. So once I've clicked on a shape, you can move these anchor points around. Okay, so that top one there makes it taller. These white ones on the edge change the size. The black ones will just change one side of it. We can also just click on a blank space and move it around. You notice I can't move it upwards. There's actually an arrow on the top to be able to move things up. Again, that's one of those things that people often forget about and really struggle with. They forget that there's that arrow there to move things up and down. You can also see these boxes. Okay, so when I'm moving that, it's actually, if I turn that to 1, okay, then that's 1 millimeter off the ground. If I turn it to 0, it'd be on the ground. And the same with changing the size of things. These are millimeters. So if I want this box to be 100 by 100, and I just type that in. Okay, so that's how we put measurements in. So for now, all I want you to do is just bring in different shapes and move them around, change the sizes, type in measurements. You can try rotating, okay, because there's 3 axes here. We've got 3 ways of turning things, okay? So at the moment, just have a little play around with that, okay? And pause the video at this point, okay? So now you've had a play around with that. Now it's time to learn a few more things. So some simple things like deleting. So I might want to delete something. What I need to do is click delete on the keyboard. I can also draw a square over multiple objects and delete them. One thing I'll point out, the scribble tool here, I've never used for anything that has a useful purpose. Okay, it's the way of creating a custom sort of shape. So if I was to create a random shape, you can see up here, that's what it looks like in 3D. I can click done, and I have that shape in here. Okay, it's really not that useful, so don't worry about it too much. So what if I want to create a shape that is not here already? Well, let's bring in a shape, and maybe I want a hole going through the middle of this shape. I want like a cylinder that goes through it. So I'm going to bring in a cylinder. I'm going to make it smaller so it actually fits. I'm going to make that one 8 so it's actually a cylinder. I'm going to put it inside there. I'm just going to make it a little bit taller so it sticks out, just to make sure it goes all the way through. Now, you'll notice I can either choose things to be a solid or a hole. So if I make it a hole, okay, that's the first step to actually creating a new shape. I then need to select both things there. So I now have the box and the cylinder selected. I'm then going to click this button here, Group. And what that does is actually creates the hole that goes through it. So also I can create holes, but I can also subtract shapes from each other. So if I put that into there, make it a hole, I select both of them, I go to Group, there we go, I've taken a chunk out of there. There is actually an ungroup button as well, so as long as that's selected I can press ungroup, okay, and it will actually separate things, okay, back out from each other. So I want you to just have a little play with that now, and that is really the basics of using Tinkercad. The next video will be an actual task that I want you to do in here.